I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Good to see everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I believe we have a member online. Emily, you said?
Yes, for the record, thank you. We have Stacy Taman and Rick Pierrick online joining us, and we do have a quorum.
Excellent. That's what I was going to say next. We do have a quorum. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve our agenda for today.
I move that we approve the agenda for today.
Second.
Thank you very much. Motion approved. Any need for discussion? Okay, fantastic. Motion goes through, and let's take a look at our new business for today. We are very excited, at least I am. I know that we have been anxiously awaiting a presentation from, I know, it really is so exciting. Cindy Scribner is with us today from the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services. So we're going to invite Cindy to the table at this time.
Thank you very much.
While she does not have, just to let you guys know, while she does not have an actual formal presentation, we're going to be taking a look at information that she's going to be giving us. And if anybody has any questions, we can kind of have a semi-informal discussion with her about the things that we are questioning and need for our final report.
Thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate it. Sorry I was not here the first time around.
It's okay.
I do have some handout stuff for you guys to take home, maybe review if
Great.
there's any additional questions or anything that you guys have that aren't answered today. I want you to please feel free to call me. And you want me to do it? Do I need to?
Do you want me to grab the handout?
Well, I can because they're all over here. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's
A little-
okay. Thank
A little
you.
bit about myself. I have been with the Department of Juvenile Services in Calvert County for over 25 years. When I first started here, I was the Spotlight, what we called them Spotlight on Schools case manager. And that position was assigned to one of the hotspot areas, excuse me, in the county, which happened to be Chesapeake Branch Estates. But we put a Spotlight on Schools worker in each high school, and then they would work with the kids that were on probation or getting in that type of trouble in the high school, and then the feeder schools. So I was at Patuxent, Mill Creek, Mill Creek wasn't even there yet, Southern Middle Schools, and if we had any kids who needed some extra guidance in the elementary schools. And I will tell you, that is my favorite position I've ever had, because I just think it was so beneficial to be able to work with these kids and their families early on and have the support of the schools. We still work very closely with the SRO, the school resource officers, the safety advocates, pupil services, but it really gave us that connection we needed to be able to keep these kids in school, which is where they needed to be. So just a little bit of background on myself. One of the things I kind of wanted to cover with everybody here first is that I kind of want to go over what the Department of Juvenile Services does not do. Because
Perfect.
There's a big misconception on what we do. What we don't do, we do not arrest youth. We do not investigate crimes. We do not emancipate juveniles. Really, no juveniles are emancipated in Tri-County area. They're really not supposed to be in all of the state. That happens every once in a while, but that is not our job.
Can you give a little more detail about emancipating, what that means, what that looks like?
Emancipated youth, often you will have, I'll give an example, like a 16-year-old who says, my parents don't do anything for me. I don't like them. I don't want to live with them anymore. I want to live with so-and-so. I want to be emancipated, meaning an informal way of saying they're not going to be my parents anymore and I don't have to listen to them.
Gotcha.
We do not do that. Parents can make a decision to allow their child to live with their friend and their family and that stuff, but we're not taking parental rights away. We're not emancipating a youth. In Maryland, there is some leeway if we'll say 17-year-old has a child and is raising that child, that they can have some different rules to follow. They don't necessarily have to call that youth's parent, the 17-year-old's parent, when they're actually being a parent and raising a child. So there's a little bit of difference there. The Department of Juvenile Services does not make the final decision on whether a juvenile, once they've committed a crime, is detained in a secure facility or released to the community. That is the judge's decision. We may make it for one night at a detention hearing, but then the youth is brought back the next day. Okay? We don't make that. We don't make the final decision as to when a youth is released from a detention facility or a program. That is a judge's decision. Okay? So I kind of want to tell you what we don't do, first of all, because there's a lot of confusion in that.
Yes.
We have families come into our office all the time, or parents, and say, I want you to charge my child. Nah. You can call Camry. But that we just don't do that. And there's just a lot of confusion, because if a family's never been involved with our system, with our agency, how would they know?
Right.
And they don't really want to know either. Sometimes it's easier just to do what they think is necessary.
Right.
Okay. What we do though is when a youth may get charged with a crime, there's kind of two routes that can follow. Okay, and one is if it is a serious crime, the police can contact us and ask for the youth to be detained. We have to follow some guidelines that are set up by our agency so that a youth in Calvert wouldn't be detained if they had done the same crime in another county. We are a state agency, and we try to have them all. We don't do probation, commitment, that stuff based on where you live. So they use some risk assessments. So if the police call us before 5 o'clock, we will make that decision we get the police report and we do a risk assessment, a detention risk assessment. If it's after 5 o'clock, we have night intake statewide, and they would contact, the police know, they will contact them and a decision will be made. If a youth is detained, they have to be seen the next court date. Not just of juvenile court. We consider juvenile court as part of circuit court, so there is a sitting of a court every day, unless it's a holiday or a weekend. So if they're detained on a Tuesday night, they come to court Wednesday morning. If it's a Friday, they come in on Monday. And then the judge makes that decision as to whether they will remain in detention, whether they will use a detention alternative, which could be electronic monitoring or GPS, or whether they'll just be released, to their parents or a guardian pending their next court date. Out of those options, in Calvert County, the majority of youth are released in the community, and that is because the majority of our crimes are misdemeanors. So it's to a point now, the police don't usually contact us if it's a misdemeanor offense to even ask for detention, because you can't detain a juvenile on a misdemeanor offense unless it's a misdemeanor handgun offense, or they have 2 prior adjudications being found involved within the last 2 years. So the majority of the cases here in Calvert are misdemeanor offenses. If the case is, if the case is not, if they are not detained, and we just receive, so they do a police report, they send us the police reports on all youth. But if they are not detained, there's like a standard kind of flow that that the case would go through, and that actually happens to be on your long flow chart. Okay, so the brown at the top, the brown is that's if they are requesting detention. Okay, we kind of covered what would happen there. If they're not requesting detention and we get the police report, it goes through a standard process where and that would be in the blue. We get the police report, we enter it. Our intake officer will review the police report, make sure that that all the information is in there. If not, we will contact the police, get it. And then a letter goes out for an intake hearing. The intake hearing is held at DJS. It is not a court hearing. Youth and parent guardian show up for the intake hearing. The law has changed. It used to be we had 25 days to get all that done. It is now, I believe, 15. My intake person had a family emergency and didn't show. So I believe it's 15 days to get them in and make a decision from there. What can happen at an intake hearing is the case can be closed at intake. Example, I don't know, fight in the neighborhood. The youth are charged with second-degree assault, which is a misdemeanor. Parent comes in, youth comes in, parent says, oh my gosh, we were shocked that he did this, we've never had this problem, he's now in therapy, he's now on ADHD medication, doesn't use drugs, doesn't use alcohol. If the family has already put the services in place, you know, we're usually going to close it or keep it open for what they call pre-court supervision, which is a 90-day informal supervision. And during those 90 days, that is to make sure that they are doing what they need to do, if they're in therapy, going to therapy. If they weren't in it and we think they should be in it, we will get them hooked up with, you know. And that's just an example of why a case could be closed at intake. If a youth says, I don't know why I was charged at the intake hearing, if they say, I don't know why I was charged, that wasn't me, I was not even in school that day, or I was out of the state, whatever, we're gonna send that case to court because we are not the judge, jury, anything. We're gonna send it and let it be found, you know, unless it's a misdemeanor that can't go to court, then we would probably close that case. Especially if they have proof that they were not even around. It was their cousin who they look very similar, you know, whatever. At the intake, if they don't close it, they could put it on pre-court supervision. And like I said, that's 90 days of supervision and services. An intake worker will contact the family on a regular basis to make sure that services have been implemented, see if they need help implementing services. Some families don't have health insurance, so we provide them. We have contracts with different agencies. Could be substance abuse, mental health, medication, community service, anger management, anything like that. Or if they don't do, the case isn't closed and they don't feel pre-court, then we will forward that case to the state's attorney's office. And the state's attorney's office can then determine whether they're going to formally petition that case for court. If a case goes to court, there's a few things that can happen there. The judge can dismiss the case. the judge can put the case on the STET docket. Does everybody know what the STET docket is?
Sorry.
Do you know what I just want to make sure everybody knows what a STET docket is, because some of our cases are placed on the STET docket, and that is where, the easiest way to describe it, the judge kind of puts that case on a shelf for 1 year, and if the youth has no additional issues, nothing, then the case goes away. If they do get arrested for something else, not follow through with some conditions, then the judge could pull that off and bring them back into court. Or the case could go forward. They could, in Calvert County, the majority of cases that end up on probation is done so by a plea agreement. We very rarely have full trials in juvenile court. Nobody wants to convict a juvenile, usually of the highest count possible, because the results are going to be the same. If they're going to be on probation, it doesn't really matter if it's for a lower offense or a higher offense, because they're going to have the same services. Because when they go in court and at disposition, which is kind of like sentencing in the adult system, DJS makes recommendations to the court. Okay? We don't do the orders, but we do make recommendations as to what this youth and family may need to be successful. And that could be a vast array of things. If the judge feels that this youth needs more than probation, they can commit them to the care and custody of the Department of Juvenile Services for an out-of-home placement. The number of out-of-home placements in the state of Maryland have really declined. The types of placements could be a residential treatment center, which is for a youth that has mental health issues and has exhausted usually all community-based services. There are very few residential treatment centers left in Maryland. Okay, Denise, 3, 4?
If that.
If that, okay, maybe 3. And those are youth that usually have had long-standing mental health issues, and it's affecting their behaviors. There are also what we call secure programs. Victor Cullen would be one, and that is used for, it's a male-only program, and it is usually for youth who have been convicted of a violent crime. Then we have the youth centers, which we consider well, they're kind of community-based. There's no big gate around them or anything, but they do go to school there. They receive all different types of therapy there. They live there. But they do things in the community as a supervised group. We have very few group homes left. And a group home is more of a community-based, they go to a community-based school, they go to therapy in the community, but they are, for whatever reason, just having great difficulties in the community where they live or with their family. And sometimes, and I hate to say sometimes, we try to push those off on DSS and they push back, but usually we try to just work together and get what, the kids what they need. Our agency has changed a lot over the past several years. We used to be, I would say, more punitive based. More kids were detained, more kids were placed on electronic monitoring, more kids were removed from their homes. That is not what we do now. Our job is to provide services to youth and their families to keep them in the community. And there's some real positives to that. The trauma that a kid goes through when they are removed from their home, it's tragic. Their behaviors may improve while they're in a controlled environment, but let me tell you, when they come home, if nothing's changed at home, nothing's changed. And then those tend to be the kids that are cycled back through the system more and more. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be consequences. That is not what I'm saying at all. Because there are. When a youth is put on probation or pre-court supervision, there are consequences. They think, unfortunately, kids view going to therapy as a consequence. They view anything someone else is asking them to do as a consequence. Yeah, not just me, not me as DJS, but me as a parent, you guys as parents, teachers, anybody. They don't like being told what to do. And that's kind of what we do. But we try to get the parents to understand it's not just the child's issue, it's a family issue. And they have to buy into it also. And when they don't, we'll have families that say, it's not my problem, it's theirs. No, ma'am, or no, sir, it's everybody's. And if you're not gonna buy in and work with them, it just really makes things difficult for everybody. And we don't get the expected change, or the change that the kid deserves. When a youth is put on probation, there are, has everybody heard of House Bill 814, which was the one that changed a lot of the juvenile laws? Some of the key takeaways from that, well, it changed a couple years ago, and then I believe our lawmakers decided, wow, the pendulum kind of swung maybe a little bit too far in one direction. We need to revisit some things. And so they did. So there were some new changes that came out to the House bill in 2024. So juvenile courts have jurisdiction when a youth is age 13 and up and alleged to have committed an act that would be a crime if committed by an adult. Okay. So we have crimes, and then we have status offenses in our agency. And a status offense is something that a juvenile can be charged with or given a citation for that is not a crime if you're an adult. Tobacco citation, adults don't get those. Running away, alcohol citation, marijuana citations, those are status offenses, and those cannot go to court. Okay, we can do something with them. We can put them in substance abuse counseling or give them a curfew or a community service or whatever we deem and their family deems as appropriate, but they cannot go to court. So if a child is age 10 or between age 10 and 12 and committed a crime that if an adult had committed that crime, it would be considered a crime of violence. A youth between age 10 and 12 could be charged with that. Second degree assault is not a crime of violence. It would be, first degree assault, firearms offenses, aggravated cruelty to animals, certain sex offense, just the more heinous crimes, armed carjacking, armed robberies. Those, a 10 or 12-year-old could be charged if they are believed to be involved in that. But under age 12, there's no jurisdiction by the court or us. That being said, if a family comes to our office and says, I have an 8-year-old and I have a problem and I need help, well, we're not going to tell them, sorry, your child's 8, goodbye. We are going to do everything we can to help them navigate community-based services and get them what they need. And that is where Denise and everybody in the community, all the other community agencies come into play. We are always calling all of them asking, hey, what's available for this age? We all work well together, and so we're not going to turn someone away, because ultimately our job is to try to help, not say, sorry, we're not going to do anything for you. With the new laws, no youth can be placed in detention before a hearing when the most serious charge is a misdemeanor, unless is a certain specific handgun offense, or the child is under DJS supervision at the time. And that means they can't be detained for the night, but we could ask for an emergency court hearing the next day. And then the judge can make that decision. We can't. There are some time frames that have changed for if a youth is placed on probation. So when I say a misdemeanor can't go to court, it can go to court if another offense with it is a felony. That does not mean they'll be convicted of the felony or found involved in the felony, so you could be placed on probation for a misdemeanor. If they were placed on probation for a misdemeanor, when the law first changed, they could only be placed on probation for a 6-month period of time, and then it could be extended to 1 year for treatment purposes only. Now it's kind of changed a little bit, and they can be placed on probation for 1 year and extended to 2 for treatment purposes only. So if the only thing they still have left to do is pay restitution, we cannot ask for that case to be extended to the 2 years. They'll have to have a judgment placed against the family. But if they haven't completed anger management, group therapy, anything that would be considered treatment, we ask for that case to be extended. And it's extended in a 3-month increment. So every 3 months, we have to present to the court why it still would need to be extended. If it is a felony, then now for a felony, it's no more than 2 years probation to start, but it can be extended to 3 years for treatment purposes only. Certain cases could be extended to 4. We've never had that because usually that's not the age of our kids. Then by then they're over 18. And if it's considered a crime of violence and they're placed on probation for a crime of violence, there is no statutory timelines that the case would have to be closed in. So it's not a 2-year period that could be extended to 3. They could keep it open till they're 21 years of age, if that's what the court so chooses to do. Just so you know, crimes of violence in Maryland are like arson first degree, armed and unarmed carjacking, armed and unarmed robbery, use of a handgun in the commission of a felony, manslaughter, murder. We're lucky we don't have those charges here very, very often at all. Right now in Calvert County, we have 2 youth in detention, but they are both what we call adult holds. They were both charged, they're both 16 years old and were charged as adults. When a youth is charged as an adult, they have a right to have what's called a transfer of jurisdiction hearing. And that would be to determine whether the case should remain in the adult court or come back to juvenile court. So that is, the transfer of jurisdiction hearing is done before there's any finding of guilt or innocence. So these 2 young men, they are sitting in Cheltenham, they are waiting for their transfer of jurisdiction hearings. We have 0 kids in placement right now in Calvert County, minus the 2 in detention. We have no kids removed from their home right now. The majority of charges that we get are second-degree assaults, disturbing school activities. Those, you guys agree? Yeah, those are what we get the most of. Some destruction of property. Our region for juvenile services is made up of Calvert, St. Mary's, Charles, Prince George's, and Montgomery. And I would say we are the luckiest county out of all those by a long shot. Because St. Mary's right now, they get a lot of gun cases. We do not. Charles County, same thing, and Montgomery and PG are I can't even begin to guess. It's not what we want to see, though. I think you guys may have this in in your handouts. There's a sheet that looks like this, and this is Calvert specific data. Okay, it's specific to Calvert County. There's some numbers that I think are accurate. There's a couple that I believe are not, but it was probably the way it was reported, or there's an error in a computer system somewhere. I do not remember in 2024 ever getting a citizen complaint and it says we had 1.1%, which could be, well, less than 1, so I'm not really sure how that happened. The majority of the complaints that we receive, basically all of them, are from the police or adult court transfers. You know, if they've been charged as an adult and it transfers back down to us. We only send approximately 20% of our cases are even forwarded to the state's attorney's office. So our numbers of kids on probation in Calvert County are low. But that's not because, I mean, that's just based on the nature of the crimes that they're committing. You know, like I said, runaways, a lot of that stuff, you know, it doesn't go to court. Misdemeanors usually don't go to court, and that's what we get. So for me, this is a great county to work in. You know, we don't have the high stress that a lot of them do. And I think a lot of that too is, I would like to say that I truly believe our school systems have come a long way. We used to get, the majority of our police reports came from the school system. This year, we've received, so far, 2 police reports. That is it from the schools. So they have come up with alternatives to use and to work with these youth and families instead of having them charged. And I mean, obviously, if it's a serious, you know, but some of the mutual fights and that stuff, there may be some other ways to handle it. And it's nice to see that they're trying out those options instead of just immediately calling the police and wanting them charged.
Cindy, can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So this is going back to what you were talking about your first role in the county, because with a lot of the work that I know that we worked on mutually, a lot of that was preventative measures.
Yes.
So in the work that you're doing now, with relation to what you're talking about with the SRO's role, do you feel like they're taking on a lot of that role and doing preventative measures, which is now being reflective?
I do.
I think DJS now is more reactive in your role, because there was a huge benefit to what you were doing at that time.
Yes.
So I wonder if that's being missed, or do you think that that's being taken up by the role of the SRO?
I don't think it's being missed. I would do anything to go back and do my job in the schools again. I really loved it. We don't have the number of kids anymore to warrant having someone full-time in the schools. I think the SROs, I think the administration, I think teachers, are all taking on a lot of the preventative roles. But mostly, I mean, the SROs, yes, the safety advocates, yes. Having therapists in the schools has changed for a lot of these kids. They've got a safe place to go. They've got someone to talk to that they can trust. And, the other people in school, they do a great job with mediation these days. So I think that's taken a lot of it away from our agency to do, which is fine. It's a true diversion to keep them out of our system. Because one of the things they've always said about, the adult corrections or juvenile services, used to be juvenile justice, now it's juvenile services, is that once they get in the system, sometimes they just get in deeper and deeper and deeper, and that's not what we want. We want them to get the services. I don't care how they get them, whether it's through the school, through us, through a volunteer organization. We want them to have the services to be successful and not come back and see us. But, you know, once a kid stays in the system, I think sometimes they feel that's what they're worth. Yeah, it's a whole lot easier to fail these days than it is to be successful for a lot of these kids.
When, because the families play such an important role during that probation period of ensuring they are getting those services, if a family isn't compliant, tell me what happens next.
It's very difficult. You know, we will try to work with the family to see why they're not being compliant. If it's because mom left and it's dad at home and he's working 40 hours a week, and the only time that service is available is in the middle of the day, we're not going to bring them back into court to punish them, you know, to try to do something to, he's gotta work. He's gotta keep a roof over their head and food on the table. What we will do is try to reach out to other organizations to see if can that service be provided in the home. And we do that a lot with Functional Family Therapy and the Institute for Family-Centered Services. They go in their home and work with the youth, family, siblings in the home. If it's because they don't feel it's their problem and so they're not going to take them, we will often bring them back into court and nicely suggest to the judge that this is why, you know, if he, you know, we can say, Tommy went to substance abuse 3 times this month and he was supposed to go twice a week. So he's not doing it, and they're gonna say why, and I'll say, well, you might wanna ask the family, and sometimes the parents are proud, well, it's not my job, I'm not taking them. It is your job, you're their parent. And the judge will usually, now they're not gonna hold the parent in contempt, they're not gonna lock the parent up, but they will strongly encourage the parent to, if you can't take them, you need to find them a ride, you need to get them on the bus, you need to find a way to get this child what he needs. Does that answer kind of?
I guess I'm just wondering, is there any point at which it's like considered like neglect?
It has been, and our judges and magistrates are very good about calling DSS to court to come to, if there are kids that are involved with both agencies, we work those cases together. You know, so we'll have hearings together, we'll make plans together. But if it's not and the judge feels it's to a point of neglect or something else, they will call and ask for a DSS representative to be present in court. They are not afraid to do that at all. And, you know, usually it's Brenda, one of the supervisors from DSS will come over and they will explain why they feel that it is their job or not their job. And usually the parent gives in well before DSS comes and explains to them what could happen.
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The 2 that you have in detainment, was it a school-based or community-based?
Community.
Community.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you find that you have more community offenses than school?
Offenses of a serious nature
Yes.
are community-based. The ones that we get, the second-degree assault, what is it, 50-50? Or more community?
I'd say 50-50.
About 50-50. Obviously, disturbing school activities is only gonna happen in school, you know, the runaways. There was, I believe when I first met with a few members of this organization, someone thought that the majority of charges we received in Calvert County were drug-related with juveniles, and that is not the case. We may receive some marijuana citations. I can tell you, we haven't received a charge for opiates or anything like that in years. Now, that's not saying that some kids don't use opiates or abuse, other prescription medications, but that's not what the originating charge was. We may find that out while we have them on probation and then make sure they get treatment for that. Our judges in Calvert County are very, very good on a probation order. One of the conditions they always add is any treatment deemed necessary or appropriate by the Department of Juvenile Services, which kind of leaves a lot of openings for us to add things if need be. Because sometimes we don't find out until later about maybe some trauma that they've suffered, and so we want to specifically get them in a specific kind of treatment. So they, they leave it open and they let us use our judgment.
I have a statement and a question. My statement is thank you for updating us and sharing this information. It's very helpful. And I appreciate your perspective about where you see Calvert County as it relates to other localities. And I think many of the people that I've interacted with here don't have a baseline of comparison. And so when they look at anecdotal situations, they feel like the sky is falling. And they don't realize that our skies are pretty bright compared to most places. And just to give you one example, in my other 3 superintendencies, I had expulsion hearings on average at least twice a month, if not more. And it was rare that we didn't have close to a dozen students a month who came to the board for expulsion. Of course, I've only been here a little over 2 months, but we've had 0. And that's an indication that there's a lot of hard work that's going on in the community and in schools. So my question is, and this data is very helpful, can you share comparative data by, if we use surrounding areas as a cohort? Do you have that information available?
Well, let me see. I do not, but I can get it, or I can, there is, if you Google Maryland Department of Juvenile Services Data Resource Guide, there is information from every county in the state of Maryland that will look like this, and this one here. Yeah, I apologize. I only brought Calvert, but on that website there's an entire 500-page data guide, and I did pull some information, from St. Mary's, Charles, and I would say Calvert's numbers actually compare mostly with rural areas in Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore. Those are who we are most like. But we can't really be grouped with them as a region because of the location being so far. So grouping us with, it would be fine if we were, just Tri-County is very similar. But when you add Montgomery and Prince George's, then if you look at our region as a whole, it looks like we've got a whole lot more crime because people aren't able to determine whether it was Montgomery or PG or Calvert.
Thank you for that. If we were to use this information in our final report, it would be nice to have kind of a cohort comparison. So
Okay.
Thank you again.
Yes, sir, and it is available in that data resource guide. And if anybody has any problems with pulling that information, if you just let me know, I'll make sure that you get what you need. Okay. And Dr. Newsom, we also attend those expulsion hearings and the suspension hearings and everything when it's a kid that we have. And usually if it's an expulsion hearing, it's going to be one that's involved with us. And we haven't had one for a long time. So good work to the Board of Ed. They do a really nice job.
I'll ask you a question too. would you like to go first?
No.
Okay. So if Pastor Jones were here, I feel like he would ask you this question, so I'm going to be his proxy today.
Great.
It's probably the one I have written down.
So the cases that you see, one of the big things we've talked about is where does the line for in-school versus out-of-school behavioral incidents begin and end? So like obviously with the school system, it's going to be a different answer. Like if students get off the bus and the bus drives away and then a fight breaks out, like do you have a lot of cases that occur outside of school, or do the majority of your referrals come from an incident that occurred in schools?
Outside of school.
Outside of school.
Yes, and not like right off the bus.
Yeah.
Weekends thing, trespassing, assault, some domestic stuff, where they're fighting, with a parent or whatever, but outside of school is the majority of our cases, especially of the felonies. The felonies outside of school, definitely.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what you're gonna ask? Okay.
My quick question is, I'm back on the 2 in detention. They're charged as adults, so where are they placed? They're placed.
Because they have, by law, they have the right to a transfer of jurisdiction hearing. Their attorney at their bail review, because it's in the, can ask for them to be detained or placed at a juvenile detention facility pending the outcome of their transfer hearing. So they are both at a juvenile detention facility. And because you may ask, one was involved with our system before and one not. Yes, ma'am.
Are there evidence-based practices that you think are in need in Calvert County that we don't have because we don't have the providers, or like where are the gaps for those evidence?
There's always gaps in service in all small jurisdictions. We do have, for evidence-based practices, we do have functional family therapy through the Center for Children. We use them. There was a waiting list. They've just hired some new staff, so there is no longer a waiting list. We use the Institute for Family-Centered Services. The nice thing is both of those are in-home programs, so people can't say, I don't have transportation. The therapists that work there at both programs are very flexible. If the family can only meet on Sundays, they will meet on Sundays. If they can only meet at 8 o'clock because whatever reasons, then those therapists, that is what they do. The Institute for Family-Centered Services is usually in the home 2 to 3 times a week. Functional family therapy is once a week. We do struggle with, I would say, intensive outpatient substance abuse treatment, trying to find a provider for that. We have a lot of families with TRICARE insurance. I think it's TRICARE, is that military?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to find therapists and providers who accept TRICARE. We have used, you guys take it, and now that new program, Health and Wellness, no, that is not their name.
Hope and Healing, I think.
Hope and Healing, Health and Wellness. I was close. But yes, they also accept TRICARE. There are services that we're missing, and we complain about it all the time. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we complain about it all the time. But when you look at the youth and families that we're serving, it's very, very hard for the state or a private provider to come to Calvert County to provide the service for 5 kids when they can stay in another region or another county and provide it to 45 kids. So it's hard. We have tried some tri-county services, you know, that a provider would come in and they could serve kids in Calvert, St. Mary's, and Charles. Unfortunately, if you live in Solomons, getting to Waldorf for the service, it's just not realistic. It may be for a few families, but not for all. We have families that don't have transportation, and it's difficult. And that's where, you know, some of the in-home services really come in. We have youth that need IHIP services, which is a very intensive in-home intervention program. Usually, a lot of the kids we have these days have significant mental health issues, where 15, 20 years ago, the kids that we dealt with were more, they didn't have, their mental health issues were not as severe. But IHIP only accepts medical assistance, and probably a high number of the families we serve have private insurance and not medical assistance. So a program like that would be nice, but we can't access it. We've tried to do contracts with them and stuff, and they, based on the way they are set up, they can't do it that way either. We're always looking for services, Jennifer, if you know some that you wanna, you know, try to bring in and help us out with. We've tried with a lot of community supports and different mentoring type programs that I think a lot of our youth could benefit from. We just can't find the mentors. It's been a struggle. Mm-hmm. And transportation's a struggle, I mean, for everybody, you know, for a lot of people in this county, so kind of all goes together.
Anybody have anything else?
I have a question, but not sure if you're gonna have an answer. It's kind of probably difficult. When I'm looking at the demographics and I'm looking at by race, it just seems like the blacks are increasing, whereas everyone else seems to be steady or decreasing. Do you have any theories about why that's happening?
I do not.
Yeah.
I do not, and that is all, you know, that is a question that it comes about whether we're talking about adult crimes or juvenile crimes. It is something that comes about,
Yeah.
you know, with all of those.
And you see no trends in why, you know, the types of offenses?
No, I would say of our more serious crimes that we have, they are usually, trying to think of some of the serious crimes. The majority of kids that I believe that we have on, let me rephrase it, on supervised probation tend to be middle to upper class white males. But that's not necessarily indicating who was charged.
Right.
That's just the ones that have been on probation. But I'm glad you told me in advance you thought it was going to be a hard question, and it was.
I wasn't sure myself. I was thinking of what could possibly be the reason.
I'll ask you another question.
Yes, ma'am?
So, the demographics section,
Yes.
I noticed there's no data, and I wonder if you collect this data, which is why I'm asking, if there's any data on students, like if they are in school, like individualized education plans or students with special needs. Do you track any of that data?
So we do enter that information into our computer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we do ask, obviously, you know, where they go to school, what grade they're in, do they have an IEP, do they have a 504 plan? But I'm not so sure that's reflected in the data resource guide, which is where this information came from.
Okay.
But we, each office tracks that because, you know, it's one of the things that we have to fill out. So it could be tracked.
Is that information that could be shared publicly?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, we can always follow up with that.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can certainly check into that for you and let you know.
thank you.
Mhm.
That'd be great. That's my next question. You're taking all my questions today.
Sorry.
Good job. No, don't be sorry. You're doing a great job.
Is that the, indicated as, students receiving special education services, Cindy? Is that how you, I'm in the guide right now, printing out for Charles and St. Mary's, but is that how you would indicate it?
That may be where they draw it from, but like on our screen, it's an education screen. We put where they attend school, what grade they're in, do they have an IEP?
Okay, gotcha.
You know, so it's yes, no, IEP, whatever. Then, when we're working with the youth, we usually get a copy of their IEP because we have releases from the schools, and then look at it and determine whether it's for social, emotional, or maybe a specific learning disability in whatever area.
Okay.
But that information, whether it would be a specific learning disability, is probably not reflected in any of our data because we get that later.
Okay, anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The average caseload seems to be declining.
Yes, sir.
Has that continued in '25?
Let me see what it was in '24, and I should be able to. I do not think it's declining. I think it's staying pretty close to the same.
Okay.
If I count the active cases in my head that the case managers have today, I would say it's pretty much staying the same.
Okay, so it is fair to say then with this caseload staying the same this year, then your process of source of complaints is still primarily the police department.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one of the things I think the public needs to understand is that the actions that are being taken with our young folks are not reflective of an unwillingness to vet them through the police or correctional system. It's rather reflective of the processes of state law as to what happens to them once they go there. Because there's a general misconception that, you know, all they're doing is giving these kids a slap on the hand and letting them go. When in fact your numbers reflect that our local law enforcement is the chief source of your referrals.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay,
And-
so what happens to them, the disposition of young people then is driven by what the law allows to take place in the criminal justice system,
Yes, sir.
based upon your age.
Based upon your age and the type of offense. Correct. And you are 100% correct that many community members feel that the police aren't charging people because they don't want to, that we're not doing anything for whatever we
And
don't
even
want.
worse, that the school system's not using the police department or legal system.
Correct. And, you know, there are, we talked a little bit earlier, you know, with misdemeanor offenses, that would be one of the reasons our caseloads have gone down, because misdemeanors don't go to court any longer, and the majority of our cases in Calvert County are misdemeanor offenses.
Thankfully.
But, correct, but that being said, that does not mean that those youth are not receiving the services that they would have received even if they went to court. You know, and they're receiving them sooner, earlier, because if a service is being implemented at the intake level, that's now within, 20 days of being originally charged. Sometimes cases weren't getting to, being heard in court for 90 days. Well, 90 days, the kid doesn't even remember what he did 90 days ago. So the youth and the families are getting needed services sooner by them not being in court.
And so that would also add to the reason why your probationary caseload is increasing?
The probation, so there's been some workaround in in the House Bill 814 that gave a little bit more leeway on actually what can happen with some cases. And so that would be, so now a victim can appeal an intake decision directly to the state's attorney's office. If there is that appeal, then the state's attorney can file a petition. So when some victims may appeal and say, well, that's not what I want to happen. I want them to get locked up. Well, that's probably not gonna happen, but the state's attorney then could file a petition and the case would get to court that way. And then they could be put on probation versus an informal supervision. And we do have more victims doing that.
Now, let me ask you, does the state of Maryland differentiate between probation and supervision?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
What are the differences?
okay, you can be under supervision on a 90-day pre-court case,
Okay.
okay? And you could be under supervision, probation supervision after a case goes to court.
Okay. So it's pre and post-trial.
It's no court versus court.
Oh, no court, but that's right. That's
So if a case is handled at the intake level, where it's not gonna go to court, and they're put on a 90-day pre-court, they still have some supervision requirements, such as, therapy, community service, anger management. Well, I'm just.
So what happens when they don't show up for therapy? Because we hear so many examples from the systems and from, I forget the collective that is in Jen's office, but the folks who come together as a collaborative team to try to work with them, that they don't participate, their parents don't participate, then what happens?
Well, it's kind of a twofold situation. If it was a case from court, a probation case, it can be brought back to court. And the judge can make a decision at that time based on, we'll provide information to the court on how many times the youth went, but we will also provide on why they weren't going. Are they not going because they don't have a ride? Are they not going because their parents feel it's a waste of time? So there's that avenue. If it's a pre-court case, it's a little bit more difficult. We can extend their pre-court supervision, which we usually do if the youth is, let's say, currently involved in functional family therapy. Okay, they're pre-court, 90-day pre-court. We put in functional family therapy to work with the youth and family. And the therapies, they aren't done. They haven't been successfully discharged yet. We will extend that case. When they're not participating, we usually try to get to the bottom of why. I mean, our case managers work really well with the youth and families to try to figure out what the dilemma is, what the problem is, why they're not participating. If it's transportation, we're gonna get a service that will work with the family in the home. If it's because they don't feel like it, then we need to do our best to change their minds.
And what does that mean?
It could mean, several different things. Well, if you don't do this, then, you're just gonna be stuck with us for longer because we're gonna try to, we're gonna extend it as long as we can. We're, why not try to find out why they don't wanna go. And we have a young man who didn't wanna go because his therapist would only meet with him at 4 o'clock on 2 days a week. Well, he's on the football team. We really don't want him to give up a positive activity for that. So we were able to find someone who would come in the home and work with him there on Sundays when he didn't have football.
Okay, that's a logical kind of response, but what I'm hearing from and witnessing from neighboring jurisdictions, the relationship between truancy and delinquency, and in my mind, if one is not participating in the prescribed program during this probationary period, then it suggests to me that they're truant in that also. So how do we reinforce, other than scheduling conflicts or positive activities are certainly among the things that we would understand. But what I'm really, what raised my antenna during the recent presentation was the fact that there's a significant number of people who just don't. And so, what's the cure?
It's $1 million question, isn't it? Wish I had the answer. It would be easy if it was the same reason for each family.
Sure.
And it's not. And we have a lot of parents that maybe were involved with our system when they were juveniles, and the system has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe that the only thing their child needs is punishment or to be locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with them to change their mindset, it's difficult, but sometimes it works, because they either have they can either work with what we're going to offer them, or they're going to continue to have the same problems. And if it's and I know there's a lot of parents who think it's not their problem, it's their kid's problem. Guess what? They're responsible for their child. And some of them go kicking and screaming, but we usually do, the majority of the youth and families that we work with do eventually participate.
Okay, and I'll stop with this question. Let's say I'm the nice guy, and
I think you are.
I decide that don't let the collar fool you. But in the midst of,
I know some of your family, so you know.
in the midst of all of this, I decide that I've been victimized, but I don't want anything to happen to this kid. I want him to go through some therapeutic change or some process. And then I find out that the kid has basically blown it off. Do I have a right then to go and appeal?
How long are you finding out?
If there's a time frame, just tell me what it is.
Now, I was going to see if you were asking, like, nothing's going to happen if it's a year down the road and you find out that,
Mm-hmm.
Johnny did not finish his anger management program.
Mm-hmm. But if I find out 60, 90 days?
I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Because that's not formal, that would be informal.
Correct.
And so they couldn't appeal to the state's attorney like you had mentioned before.
What's the deadline for that? How many days?
They get letters. The new law has changed the intake process. Okay, so we have to hold the intake within like 15 days now, and we're going to say that you're still the victim. Okay,
Mhm.
You get notification. I think you have 5 days to appeal to the state's attorney's office. Now, I will tell you that, let's say you're out of town and you're in Florida. I am certainly not going to say, well, Mr. Jones, sorry that you were on vacation. You're past the deadline. We will contact the state's attorney and see if they can, and the state's attorney's office is outstanding about working with victims,
Mm-hmm.
And they will see if they can petition the case.
Okay.
In terms of like educating the public on the system and how it works, how does that education happen, or do you think it doesn't?
I think it probably, sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't, because a lot of times people think they already know the system because they watch TV or they were involved in the system 25 years ago. We get parents that call us, my son's a runaway, or my daughter's a runaway. When you find her, okay, I'm not investigating, I'm not out looking for her, but when you find her, I want you to lock her up. I'm like, what? That's not the way it works. And so, like on a one-on-one, we do a lot of stuff, like National Night Out, that kind of stuff, have tables. People do tend to avoid us. It's not like they're going to the health department because they want something. They usually come to us because they have to, not because they want to, except for the families who have, in their mind, tried every avenue and are begging for help. If the help is reasonable and that is not lock my child up, if it's we need this, this, and this, you're at the right place. We are going to try to find them the services that they need. So, and it's kind of hard, you know, there are, like I said, there's stuff, but people believe what they want to believe and what they see on TV. Or on the internet, because that's all real.
Just want to confirm that our two members that are online, Rick and Stacy, don't have any questions or comments that they want to provide.
I do not have any, thank you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Emily, I did have a question.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Thank you. Ms. Scribner, thank you so much for joining us here today. I think all of us in Calvert should be very grateful to have you, you know, as an attorney working, you know, through the Tri-County region. You know, I think this committee needs to understand what a blessing it is to have you and your team work in these cases, because it is not the same in other jurisdictions. The level of the way you all cooperate with other agencies, the way that you all cooperate with the defense bar in helping these juveniles, that should really be commended. So my question to you is if you could explain to the committee a little bit about the role of DJS within the school, specifically, you know, monitoring children that are juveniles that are on probation and providing services within the you know, walls of the school.
Thank you for your kind words, Rick. Yes, so to monitor the kids within the schools, usually most of the principals know which kids are on probation in the building. The teachers don't, unless the kids tell them, but we certainly don't. The principals do, the vice principals do, and they see us come in and out of the school, but they don't get on the radio and say, "Hi, well, Laura Smith come down, your probation officer's here." They call them to guidance or to, you know, but the probation officers that are in the school, they do work pretty closely with the teachers, you know, and with guidance, all that to see what is going on. Does this youth need additional help? If they're having behavioral issues in school, what can we implement, usually in conjunction with the school, to keep them in school, to get their parents on board, to try to get school-based therapy, to anything that we can. But they usually, the probation officers monitor their attendance, their behavior, all that stuff, because when we go to court, our judges and magistrate, the first thing they ask these kids is, what are your grades? How's your attendance? Have you been in trouble? Because school is so important, and it's really nice that our bar and the defense attorneys, they know that these kids are going to be asked that question. They make sure that the families and the kids are able to answer the questions. If they can't, they rely on us to answer them for them. But we usually have all the information before we do that. A lot of times the school knows first before anybody else what is going on with the kid, especially when the youth is attending school on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, I got a call from somebody at Patuxent High School saying, "Hey, can you help come up with something for this one family? We know a lot of agencies are working with them, but there's no food in the home. There's whatever." So tonight, when I leave here, I'm going to pick them up and take them grocery shopping. You know, how can I expect the kid to do what he needs to do, or the family, if they're hungry? You know, but we rely on the staff in the schools to get the information to a principal or a guidance counselor, and then it will come to us, and vice versa. They call us for a lot, and we just have always had an outstanding working relationship. And I think Rick knows this, and most of you, because I said I started in Patuxent High School, and the nice thing is, so many of the principals and vice principals at all the schools came through Patuxent High School, so I've known them, you know, for many years, and it just helps with our working relationship. But the goal is to keep them in school and getting their education and graduating.
And sorry, just as a follow-up, are there things that you're not able to do in the schools that would be helpful to these families that y'all are servicing?
I think right now, I think the school system, Calvert County, they've allowed us to do what we need to, what needs to be done to work with these kids to get them through the system and get them graduated. And Rick, as you know, each of the kids, their needs and their family needs on each youth is going to be very different. So a lot of them we have to look at on an individual basis. But if there was something that I felt would benefit one of these kids in the school, I would go straight to the principal or pupil services and talk to Cecilia or Molly Wanamaker and see what we could do to get it implemented. That's the nice thing about a small county is that you have all these working relationships with all the different agencies. And I'm very lucky to be in this county to be able to do that with these agencies, because not all counties have that, Calvert County is probably the only one where DJS gets along with Department of Social Services. And other counties always say how lucky we are that we have that working relationship and are able to do that. We work with the same families.
And I often say that when it comes to our size is an advantage, and we ought to be able to get it right because it's manageable. The numbers are manageable, and so we're not struggling with a volume that basically is prohibited in terms of cost or personnel to correct it.
One more thing, are there, or how many, do you know of how many counties that have an MOU between the health department and I don't know if you would know this or not, between the school system and the health department to be able to offer mental health services? I don't know if anybody on the panel would know that. At one point, I know that we were one of the few that actually had.
Specifically mental health services?
Yes, in
So
the school system.
there's actually only, I believe, 3 health departments that actually provide behavioral health services.
Okay,
The rest of the counties in the state of Maryland have privatized it.
okay.
And in those 3 counties, I can't say if any of them provide it specifically in the schools. So other jurisdictions I know have private companies that come in or work independently, but I can't tell you if the other ones do it or not.
Okay.
I know in Charles, I believe it's nonprofits that they contract with. I know Tri-County is one of them at some point, Services Bureau.
Yeah.
They've had a number, I think.
St. Mary's, I believe, uses their own personal health hub. But the other 2 health departments that have behavioral health services, I believe it's, don't quote me on this, Allegheny and then maybe Carroll.
Okay.
It's definitely
So, yeah,
gaining.
more.
I know that because we were just talking, I was just in a meeting discussing it, but I do believe mental health services are now offered in most regions in the school, but whether it's through the health department or
Right.
privatized is.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank
the
you.
manner of service differs across jurisdictions too.
Okay.
It's interesting you mentioned the point that a lot of the principals in the system now originated in Patuxent. And I'll let you in on a little secret. When we opened Patuxent High School, we made a deliberate decision to only put our best and brightest on the entire staff. And in doing that, the goal had little to do with the leadership trend. It had to do with, could we turn around our lowest performing student demographic by giving them the best teachers and by giving them the best staff. By the second year, they had turned around the performance of those students.
Absolutely.
And by the third year, they were the top performing high school we had. And the record will speak to that, and it speaks to the quality of staff in front of whomever.
And you can, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Patuxent High School also has, in the county for years, more teachers in that school who were originally students there, who went away, got a 4-year degree, their master's, and have come back to that area to raise their family and teach in that school. And I just think that says so much about the school itself.
Yes, yes, and it speaks to what we hope we would create. And I think that Patuxent is an example of intentional student performance and leadership development. When that was a decision we made intentionally. And in fact, we had to have conversations with our friends in the unions about that when we were staffing that school.
Well, you guys did it right.
I have a question. What happened to the schools where you pulled all the good teachers from?
They got to hire new good teachers.
There you go. That is definitely the right answer.
Yeah, and that was important because at the time that we did this, we were also increasing teacher pay significantly, so that we could again compete for the best and the brightest. I mean, we had one class that I remember that when I say class, people that we brought in, low GPAs graduating from college were 3.5s. So there was a time when we could, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had a student body and a community that was very pro-education and very receptive to supporting schools. I mean, where else in Maryland is there a percentage of a county budget designated to schools? Where else? Where else? That says something overall. Whether you think it's enough or not, that is a major statement in and of itself.
Do you have family members who have been at Patuxent High, teachers, administrators? I think one of my most favorite people in the world is probably related to you.
Yeah, probably is.
Well, there's actually 2 of them, and they're related, so I'm guessing they're both related to you.
But part of that whole process of maintaining a standard is one of the reasons that we're here now, because we don't want this process that is new and different for this community as it pertains to juvenile services to be seen as an inhibitor to progress in our school system. We invest a lot in our schools.
Yes, sir.
And we want the best.
Okay,
Anybody
anything
else?
else?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and sorry if I was kind of
Thank you for coming
scatterbrained going through. It's not a real exciting agency when, the process is, it's kind of boring, and that's why.
But it's very important.
It is, and, we never know what's gonna happen, we do have, a new, acting secretary of our agency, who I think knows the agency very well, has that because she had been there for a long time prior to leaving. But she is all about trying to make sure that these kids get the treatment they need instead of the other. So, it's nice to have people all the way at the top who back what we do.
Very important.
So, thank you
Good
very
to
much. I
hear.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much for everything.
Let me give you my phone number in case you have any questions or need some information
Okay.
later. It's 443.
That'd be
I didn't bring any cards. Well,
It's
my
okay.
cards have the wrong number on them. It's 443-532-6361.
Okay.
And if you lose it, Denise has it, and Emily has it. Jennifer has it, and Kim has it, and Andrew, and all the ones we deal with. But thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, that was amazing, wasn't it? I think it was worth the wait for sure. So if we move along to our item number 2 for today, we're going to be taking a look at preliminary conclusions and status update for our final report. We know that we have kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel at this point. We've been doing a lot of data gathering, hearing a lot of presentations, meeting with people, either in this room or outside of this room, to gather as much information as we could to allow us to get to a point where we are ready to think about recommendations that we are going to be sharing, hopefully, with all of our stakeholders. When the chair and I met with the county commissioners, I had kind of asked that when it comes time to share that final report, I would love to have everybody in the same room, just so that everybody's hearing and part of a conversation about what we have deemed to be recommendations that we feel are important. I think it's going to be important to make sure that, like I said, that you hear it right from us. So it's not, oh yeah, I heard at the meeting they said this. We really would like to have everybody there. And Commissioner Hans said, you give us a heads up and we'll make it happen. So we're hoping that, you know, we can get everybody that we think is going to be playing a role in making sure this final report happens, and the accountability piece, everybody's there so we can kind of all be on the same page. We've got a skeleton, I believe, that's been shared with everybody for what that final report's going to look like. We've been meeting in our subcommittees just to kind of take a look at where, including information that we got from the survey, where we think we want to direct some of that important information towards those future recommendations. I know for my subcommittee, the student safety, Caitlin and I have been working just on taking a look at policies and where we think there could be some gaps, some things that could be put into place to help specifically with bullying and attendance. So, you know, it's just, we're just kind of in that process of getting ready for the final report. Emily, I don't know if there's anything that you want to share, because you have been kind of meeting with, I think it's 3 of our subcommittees at this point, to try to get some more information, if anybody's still needing information, if anybody's still having questions that they need to have answered before we start really digging into that recommendation piece.
So I have reached out to 3 subcommittees. You know who you are. There are 2 subcommittees. Looking at you, Dino, and Sergeant Woodford, and Leslie, your subcommittee as well. I need to reach out to you both, but basically pulling together, whether in our small group syncs or in group conversations, basically what your subcommittee has generated at this point into your findings and recommendations that have just been thrown out in conversation. So I have sent 3 subcommittees these documents for their groups, and over the next few weeks we're going to fine-tune them, work with the subcommittees I haven't reached out to yet to get them the information that they need. And the idea is to have a working draft, so it's not going to have the full design, but like a working draft for it to review and really lean into and do deep edits to during the November meeting, as well as in the November meeting, we really need to discuss as a group what implementation strategies look like, so to ensure the recommendations are actually implemented over time. So I think that is what the November meeting is going to look like, as well as the student focus group. There's 3 members that we've asked to work with school administration to create a student focus group of students that were nominated from all of the high schools. So they will be meeting with those students before the November meeting and presenting the findings of that student group during the November meeting too. Beyond that, there's really no future presentations like Cindy and all the other groups we brought in. That is not planned at this point. But when I've met with all of the subcommittees, I've gathered any outstanding questions that they still have, and I plan to distribute them to the ex officio members as I get them. So that should hopefully wrap us up by December or January.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
So, could you share with us the questions you have for the focus group for the youth? And how do you come up with those questions?
So we have 3 members of the committee who were Pastor Jones's recommendation. So Leslie is going to be one of the members. Denise is going to be one of the members, and Sinitra is going to be the 3rd one. So they're going to work together to compile some questions, and if you have questions for the student focus group, you can send them to myself or send them to Leslie or Denise or Sinitra to get them incorporated into the student focus group questions. We're aiming to do the student focus group likely early November, but we're going to work with Dr. Newsom's office to coordinate that date. So if you have specific questions that you want to be incorporated, just let us know and we'll make sure they get asked.
Okay, I believe at this point we are ready for a public comment. Emily, do we have anybody?
If you are joining us online and wish to leave public comment, please use the raise your hand function now, and we will allow you to unmute to provide public comment. One more time, if you wish to leave public comment, please use the raise your hand function now. No public comment today.
Just one more question, Richard. Have we heard back from Mr. Titus with regard to when we are going to meet with his staff?
I do not believe
Don't
I've
think
heard
so.
back quite yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen. All right, so tomorrow at 6 p.m., Microsoft Teams, our next public input session will be there. If you are able to attend, that would be fantastic. I will be working at my second job, but I will be making it happen. Our next regular meeting is going to be November 19th, and I believe today, are we still staying behind for a public photo? Is that, or I'm sorry, a group photo?
Yes, we'd like to take a picture of the group for the final report. If you all could stay back for just 1 or 2 minutes.
Just for a second.
Just for a second.
All right, if nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'm sure there's a need for discussion, so meeting adjourned.
Do we have enough